The wedding was everything they had dreamed of. Family members filled the hall with laughter as phones were raised to capture smiles, tears, and the promise of a future that looked secure and full of love. The bride glowed in white, her joy unmistakable. The groom stood proudly beside her, calm, composed, and seemingly devoted. To everyone watching, this was a union blessed with hope, a new beginning sealed with vows, applause, and celebration. No one knew that within hours, that dream would turn into a nightmare too horrifying to comprehend. The ceremony ended in warmth and happiness. Guests hugged the couple, offered prayers and congratulations, and slowly made their way home. The newlyweds left together, stepping into what should have been the first quiet moments of their married life. It was supposed to be the start of their honeymoon, private, intimate, and filled with excitement about the future. Instead, it became the setting for one of the most shocking domestic crimes Chicago had seen. Shortly after returning home, the joy of the day faded. According to investigators, an argument began behind closed doors. What sparked the disagreement may never be fully known, but what followed was an eruption of violence that stunned even seasoned detectives. In a moment that defied reason, the husband attacked his new wife. Authorities say he doused her with a flammable substance and set her on fire. The woman who had walked down the aisle only hours earlier, celebrated as a bride, was suddenly trapped in unimaginable pain inside the place she believed would be her safe haven. Her screams cut through the night. Neighbors later reported hearing cries for help and smelling smoke. Panic spread quickly as emergency calls were placed. Firefighters and paramedics rushed to the scene, unprepared for the horror they were about to encounter. Inside the home, they found the young bride critically injured, her burns severe and life-threatening. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Doctors worked tirelessly, fighting against overwhelming odds. Burns covered a large portion of her body, causing extensive trauma and organ failure. Despite every medical effort, the injuries were too severe. Hours after celebrating her wedding, the bride succumbed to her wounds. Her life, once filled with plans, hopes, and promises, was extinguished almost as quickly as it had begun its next chapter. As news of the crime spread, shock rippled through the community. Friends and relatives struggled to process what had happened. The same people who had celebrated a wedding were now confronted with grief and disbelief. Wedding photos began circulating online, smiling faces frozen in time, now haunting reminders of what was lost. How could a man who had just pledged love and protection commit such an act of cruelty? Police moved swiftly. The husband was arrested and charged with murder. During questioning, investigators described him as detached and unresponsive, offering little explanation for his actions. Nothing he said could justify the brutality of what had occurred. As detectives pieced together the timeline, troubling details began to emerge. Some people close to the couple later revealed that the relationship had not been as perfect as it appeared. There had been arguments, moments of tension, and signs of controlling behavior that now felt like warning signals. At the time, they were dismissed or minimized, hidden behind apologies, promises, and the belief that marriage would bring stability. Experts say this belief is tragically common. For some abusers, marriage does not represent partnership or commitment. Instead, it becomes a symbol of control. The wedding ring, rather than uniting two people, can trigger entitlement, dominance, and rage. Research shows that domestic violence often escalates after major life events such as marriage, pregnancy, or financial stress. This case reflected that reality in the most devastating way. In court, prosecutors laid out the sequence of events: a joyful wedding, a private argument, and a deliberate act of violence that left no chance for survival. The evidence painted a clear picture. This was not an accident. It was not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was an intentional act with irreversible consequences. The husband now faces the full weight of the legal system, but no sentence can undo what was done. No verdict can restore the life that was taken or ease the pain left behind. For the victim's family, grief was compounded by disbelief. They had attended a wedding expecting to celebrate a new beginning, and instead were forced to plan a funeral. dress she wore on her wedding day became a symbol not of joy, but of loss. Every memory of that day now carries a shadow. The community mourned alongside them. Vigils were held. Candles were lit. Strangers left flowers and messages of sympathy, expressing heartbreak and anger. Her story resonated deeply, not only because of the brutality, but because it revealed a truth many struggle to accept, that danger can exist even in moments meant to symbolize love and safety. The tragedy reignited conversations about domestic violence and the warning signs that often go unnoticed. Advocates emphasized that abuse does not always begin with physical harm. It often starts subtly, with manipulation, jealousy, emotional control, isolation, and silence. By the time violence becomes visible, it can already be too late. Her death stands as a painful reminder that love should never be measured by fear, and commitment should never come at the cost of safety. It challenges communities to look beyond appearances and to take concerns seriously, no matter how perfect a relationship may seem on the surface. A wedding is meant to represent hope, unity, and the promise of tomorrow. For this Chicago woman, it marked the end. Her story now lives on not just as a true crime case, but as a warning, one written in tragedy and loss. It urges awareness, it demands vigilance, and it reminds us of a truth that should never be forgotten. True love does not control, destroy, or take a life.